Cool. So we're walking through how do we add something to GitHub, and then I'll actually talk about nested GitHub repositories, and we'll look at that real quickly so we can see how this all works. Cool. So there's a couple things you're going to need, obviously, to put something to GitHub, and this is a way that we can put our code, our repository to GitHub, and then just be able to put the hyperlink in and submit an assignment that way. First thing you're going to need is to log into GitHub. If you haven't already, create an account. You'll create an account. You'll do all that. The second thing you'll need, and it'll show you how to sort of set up your account. You'll have a couple different things to attach your terminal to GitHub. So you'll have to do like your global email and your name, and you'll have a token as well. Somebody asked a great question about tokens in Discord. You'll see sometimes people build a token for each assignment. Now, in my opinion, that's unnecessary for Coding Dojo. The idea behind a token is that when GitHub, if we have, I don't think it'll show anything, but I want to make, I don't want to show it, because if my tokens are there, then you can steal my stuff. But the idea behind a token is basically some authentication, right? It's a way to say you have, in order, it's like a password, right? You think of those like swanky, cool places that you can go in order to get in, you have to have the secret password, same sort of thing, right? For the real world, if you're doing some freelancing, or if you're a contract person, right, and you're doing different assignments, you have a couple different companies, it makes sense to have a token. And the reason is because it will actually separate and sort of segregate your code into different chunks, and you can only access certain code with the certain access key, right? So let's say you bring on somebody, you're getting really popular, you have a lot of business, and all of a sudden Robert wants to come on and say, hey, I'm going to join you. Cool, here's my token, you can work on this. And there's another way to do it, but that's the idea, right? You can have access to this. Now, if you just had one token and you were doing a whole bunch of different companies you were working for, and you give somebody access to your token, well, that actually might give them access to a bunch of different companies, right? So that's where the idea of it's okay, it's good to have a token per sort of project, because then even if that gets leaked, only one of your projects is susceptible, and B, it gives you the availability to sort of share without having to go in and create a collaborator, stuff like that. So once you are, and we're going to go from you are set up within your terminal, you can go to GitHub. There's a few things that you can do. I'm going to first make a list, or I'm going to make a new, just a fake project that I'm going to throw to GitHub. Right here, if I want to, because this is kind of cluttered, right? I've been doing some stuff and looking into this nested repository issue. But this is kind of cluttered. What I can do, because I'm on a Mac, I'm not sure Windows. I don't know if Justina's in here, but if she is, then maybe she can try to find this. I can do a couple things. I can type clear, and that will clear the entire thing. Or what I can do is I can type, and I already did it, so that's why it's automatically doing it. If I do Control L, that will take it, and it looks like it's a brand new terminal, but all of my information is still here. So it gives me some space to where I'm not panicking and like, oh my gosh, this is so much. But if I wanted to have access to like, oh, what was that command I wrote? What is the certain things I did? I still have access to it. If you do clear, it's just going to clear the entire terminal. Everything's going to be gone. So cool. We're starting at a new spot. Let me go back.
I didn't know about that one. Windows now, I don't see if Windows has it, but I use Bash a lot, so
okay.
I can check it.
Okay, so we're going to create again, I'm going to do mkcd. I have an alias. If you guys, and I'm only going to spend about 10 more minutes on this because I do want to talk about, Bootstrap as well, but I have an alias where if I say mkcd, it makes a new directory with whatever name I do, and then it CDs into it. So it's just faster for me. So mkcd is something I created, but I guess I could do it without it. So here we're our instruction. I'm going to say mkdir. That is, I'm going to make a new directory, and I'm going to say GitHub example. Cool. Now I need to CD into GitHub example. Remembering if I press tab, it'll autocomplete as long as it's unique. Cool. Now I'm in GitHub example. I want to add a new file. Let's just create an index.html file. Can anybody remember what command I do to add a new file? Anybody know? We talked about it in the first GitHub. Yeah, exactly. It's touch. Yeah. So I'm going to say touch index.html. Now, if I look into it, what do I use to look into what do I have access to, or what's within this? What's the command? I want to view all the stuff within it. Yeah, exactly. On Mac, it is ls. I believe it's dir on Windows. Cool. So I see that within my GitHub example folder, directory and folder, the same thing. I have an index.html file. Perfect. Now I'm going to say code space period, and that is going to open this up in VS Code. Eventually. Okay. So let's say I just want to, I'm just going to do this. Cool. I'm just going to say test. That's all I want to do. This is a, H1 that says test. Cool. I'm done. I've completed it. This is my assignment. Well, what I can do is I can come here to GitHub example, make sure, let's say, that I'm not in this. I need to navigate to the folder or the assignment that I want to do. And then, and this is, I want to point out, this is if you're doing an individual repository, you're not doing a class repository. I'll show you how to do a class here in a second. This is just based off of this is an individual. You're going to do a repository for each class. What I will do is I will go to GitHub example. Here, now that I'm done, I've completed it, or at least I want to get it on GitHub. What I say is I say git init. That's my first one. This is me initializing a repository for this folder. When I say git init, it says initialized empty repository. That tells me I'm not there's no nested issues. Cool, I've created it, no worries. Now I'm going to say git add. Now I can say index.html, that'll work just fine. Or I can say git add space period. Git add space period means add everything in there. So if you have multiple files that you're working on, git add space period means add anything new. Or index.html, if I just wanted one individual file, say I was working on a bunch of stuff, only one file's done, I don't want to push the other stuff to GitHub, I could just say index.html, that'll do that. Once I do that, I add it. Great. It doesn't look like anything, but if I say git status, that should see, okay, cool. I see this in green, meaning I've added this. Now my repository sees this new addition here, this new file. Perfect. Now notice it says no commits yet. So I say git commit -m. This -m says, here's the message I want to have. You say first commit. This message can be, ooh, do not like that. Uh-oh. Oh, I need to do, let's see. Okay. Whoops. No idea what I did there.
You forgot the second quotes at the end.
Oh, there you go. I guess maybe I fat thumbed it and went to the quote, I did the enter. Cool. So I'm committing and saying, okay, I officially want to commit to this. Here's my message. Here's the message that I want to put. First commit, I enter this. Cool. Now it says one file changed. Perfect. Now I'm done for right now. If this is a new repository, I'm going to come now to my GitHub and I'm going to say new, and I'm going to say GitHub example. Perfect. I'm creating a new one. And here, you shouldn't have this. I just am part of multiple teams. And so that's why I have to do owner. But if you guys are just yours, then you won't have to do the dropdown. But here I have GitHub example. That's what I've named it. It just has to make sure that it's unique. You can't name test. You can't have the same name over time. Description is optional. You don't have to put anything. Make sure it's public so that way we can see it. And then you say create repository. Now, once you create repository, you're going to get this prompt right here, this quick setup. Now, if we hadn't already done the git init, git add, git commit, right? This is thinking that it's a brand new repository. We could have run this. And this is why it's a great little example, or GitHub's awesome because it already tells you sort of what you need to do. But we've already created the new repository, right? Like in here, we've done that. So we come to this existing repository. Now what we'll do is we'll grab this, and I definitely like to copy and paste this one because if you don't, there is some issues that can happen. Cool. I copy and paste it. I enter it. Now I just add these other two. And you can copy and paste them too, or type them. It's not as big of a deal. But here I'm saying I want my branch to be main. So that's, I'm identifying this is my main branch. And then when I say git push u dash u or I always spell origin wrong, main. What this is doing is it's saying now, if I'm going to add to this again, I don't have to go through this entire process. I can just say git push. So I'll show you what that means here in a second. So now when I run this, it connects the two, my Git repository to GitHub. If I refresh, here I've got my file. So if you're going to submit a assignment, all you'll do is you'll come here, copy this, put this in the GitHub link, and then whenever we look at it, we can click on it and it'll take us straight to your code. Now, let's say we wanted to add to this. I'm going to say this. Here we go. I added a script and a p tag. Now my code has changed, right? They're no longer the same. So here's what I do. I navigate to, do Control L. I navigate to my same folder, right? Now I say git add. I don't need to say init because I've already initialized this. Now I'm just going to say add. I can say git status. And we're going to see, okay, I modified this file. Perfect. So I'm going to say git commit -m, added p tag and script. Perfect. I give a description of what I've done. Cool. It adds it. And then now, because I've already initialized and I've already done this, all I have to do is say git push. When I do that, it automatically adds. Now you see this was first commit. If I refresh, we see added p tag and script. And if I were to look at this, here's the differences between the two. And you can see that now it has this updated code. Any questions on how to, this is how you would just do a normal assignment.
But we have with the React, we have so many files. So how can we, like we bundle on one and then we do like this, right?
So when we have a React file, let's just take this one right here. We have this when we are this is what we're doing today. When we have this created, when we do npx create React app, what it actually does is it creates this file right here, this git ignore. And what that means is when we push and initialize our code, and if we add it to GitHub, it'll add everything, but it'll ignore all of these files. It'll ignore all of our node modules. So everything in here, it ignores. It ignores the coverage folder. It ignores, this is if this was in prod and we built it, any sort of environment variables, it'll ignore all of that. And so similar to how you see here, hard to go back. Oops. And we have this feb MERN. I have we'll go to week 2. This was yesterday's, right? Lecture 1 in class. Here, I've got my React file, but you notice I don't have any sort of node modules because it automatically ignores them. And so the same thing will happen. You do the same sort of cadence. If you're going to add React, it does the same thing. It's okay. It can handle that as long as you have this git ignore, which if you're using npx create React app, it'll automatically be created for you. So you can still push it just like I have here.
So would you show me another way, like how, like I can like remove the node thing? So before I submit with the regular way?
Yeah. So what you would do is, let's say we did something like this. Let's say npx create React app and then a React test. So we're actually creating this within my GitHub example. Wait for this to download. Cool. So now if I ls, I see this, now I have my React test. So I can actually cd into React test. And you see I have this node modules, right? What I can do is I can just say rm space dash rf node modules. Modules, oh my goodness, ules. Cool, now if I say ls, you see I no longer have that. The rm space dash rf is removing those. And so now if I were to zip this up, I no longer have these node modules here. Yeah, so now I have, I remove those. Again, I think this is the better way to do it. But if we were to say, let's say we did this, you follow this pattern and then you want to work on this and now node is not working again, you can say npm install. And that'll look at your package JSON and see that you need a whole bunch of things. And then now let's say ls, and now we have our node modules back. Don't worry about these. These are okay. So now your node modules are back there.
Okay, I see that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any questions on that? The last thing to note is, actually, I'll talk about it. I'm going to talk about sort of the nested repositories that everybody I feel like is stressed about. We'll talk about that here in a bit, because I want to make sure that everybody's here for that. But I'll show you, this is, I am back to, I don't remember what folder this is, sorry. Oh yeah. Okay. So I want to CD. So now I want to add. So this is, let's say we have this parent repository, right? That right now MERN is my repository, right? That is what is currently being hosted on GitHub. Well, if I CD into week 2, and I see this, now you see that I've got an in class, I've got a solution, I got a lecture 1 in class and lecture 1. But if I were to go to GitHub and if I look at this week 2, I only have these 2, right? I only have these 2. Well, what I can do is, instead of, and this is where a lot of, I think the confusion's coming from, is students are doing something like this. I want to add lecture 2 solution. So they CD into lecture 2 solution, and then you run git init. That is creating a new repository. Remember, we're initializing a new repository with git init within a repository that also already has that. That is the issue that I think we're running into. We do not need to git init. My parent folder of February 23 MERN is my initialized repository. So if I want to add both of these things to my code, what I can do is actually come back. Oh, I forgot the space. I come back to the parent. Now I say git add space dot git status. Cool, perfect. I say git commit -m added lecture week 2 lecture 2 solution. Perfect. I added this, and all I have to say is git push. Perfect. So now if I come here and I refresh, that code is here. The issue that I think this is also confusing, is that when we run npx create React app, it initializes a new Git repository. That's what it's supposed to do. Now, it's also very smart, And so what it will do is before it actually initializes your Git repository, it will check to see, is there a parent Git repository already in place? The way that, and I'll sort of show you what it means. If there is, right? So in this case, when I ran npx create react app for the lecture 2 solution, it already noticed, oh, feb MERN is a Git repository. Therefore, I don't need to create that. And here's how we can see it. If you type ls, there's going to be these things right here, right? This is what we have access to or what we can view. Now, if I type ls-al, now these are my hidden files as well. And here you see there's this Git folder. This is a massive folder that keeps track of everything, all of your commits, all of your changes, everything associated with the repository. So because my parent has this, what npx create react app does is it looks up the chain and says, is there a .git file already created? If there is, then I don't need to create one. And we can see that that's true when I look at CD week 2, TWO, CD lecture 2 solution. If I type ls, I have this React, which shows that I used npx create react app. But if I say something like this, remember, same sort of idea. If I say ls-al, there is no .git folder because npx create react app will look and see, oh, I don't need to create that because it would then be initializing within. It says I don't need to create that because the parent of feb 23 MERN already has that file. So I think that's where a lot of the confusion is. Again, if I were to say git init, then it's going to give me a, hey, you tried to initialize within, it's a nested repository. But if I think some of the confusion is, yes, npx create react app will initialize that if the parent doesn't already have that. But because it does, we're okay and we don't have to worry about it. It's not going to do that. And I can just push it just like this and this is fine. Robert, thank you for posting that in GitHub. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah, there's a cheat sheet basically that I use that I just have on VS Code, and it's got all my stuff. Like, so it's got a get in it, and it's got columns, it locates everything. It's like, what are you trying to do? So that's on Discord.
Yeah, and I just pinned it. So if you guys are confused or, where was that? It'll be in the pin for our class. Cool. Any questions on that? Any thoughts on that? Any confusions there? Okay.
But just I guess just to clarify, if we do the npx create react app and then we do just git init, it won't screw anything up, right?
As long as it's not already within an initialized repository.
Okay.
Yeah. So for example, my feb 23 is my parent, right? That's what kind of holds everything. So whenever I create in week 2 and I create this file, if I run npx create react app, it'll create it and that's fine. And it knows, just like we saw, it'll skip creating this .git folder, right? It does that in our feb 23, but it doesn't do that here because it says, oh, it is already, it's already created in my parent. If I were to now say git init, yeah, that could cause some issues because now I'm trying to initialize a repository within my repository. And that's sort of where that's where I think a lot of issues are happening. So as long as we've already created and initialized, you only initialize one time. So if we want to add to stuff, you just go to the parent that you initialized in, you run git add, commit, push.
Also just so you know, we have our Git series tomorrow. So it's going over a little bit more advanced Git stuff, but you can still ask your questions there. Just letting you know, FYI, it's tomorrow at 2 p.m. I think Pacific time.
Yep.
Yeah. So we typically make announcements there. So That way more hands-on experience with Git and see more examples there as well.
Yeah. Yep. Any other questions, friends? Somebody asked where they can see all the office hours. That's just going to be right here. Every day I will post the office hours. These are just hyperlinks to the videos. So if you wanted today's, it'll be right here. And then I try to put what did we talk about for each happy hour. So I do go over some terminal basics in GitHub right here, but this will just be another one. Okay. Great. Well, I want to have some time where I can, let's see, where do I want to put this? Let's go into lecture. I'm just going to actually go back to the GitHub example. And we'll just build off of that. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to talk about Bootstrap. Bootstrap's going to be a tool. I'm going to start using it today. It's very, very, very easy to add to a React app. We're going to talk about the basics of Bootstrap here for the first, 15, 20 minutes. We'll see it in place, and then in class, I'll show you exactly. Sorry, I'm moving my desk. I'll show you exactly how we can use this for React and how powerful it's going to be. So Bootstrap, if you've never heard it, is a great tool for being able to style things very, very, very quickly. So Bootstrap is just a CSS. You can think about it as a package of classes, or in CSS, if you have a bunch of different classes, you have all these styles, right? You have all these different things that you can do. Bootstrap's very popular for themes. It's very popular for sort of just different things within that you can do for a form. If you wanted to create some sort of typography, if you wanted to do like an accordion, so you wanted things to be able to do something like this, just this basic functionality. Instead of having to build that out yourself, Bootstrap actually provides you with these different classes that is already built that you can just call the class, and then you get all the functionality versus having to go in and CSS and build that. I'm a huge fan of Bootstrap because it can make it look nice, and I don't really love CSS, transparently. And so it's a great, great thing that we can use and really build in pretty quickly. So the way we're going to do this is there's a few different ways. Now you can download Bootstrap if you wanted, or you can just include what we call a CDN. Really, it's just a link to the actual package of the library itself. So all I'm going to do is I'll put this in, actually put this in the chat. Perfect. And so I'm going to include the CDN. Now it has multiple things. They've got CSS, and then they've got JavaScript. And you can do some really powerful things with this. I will always just do CSS. But JavaScript, there's a lot of functionality there as well. I'm just going to link the CDN. If you wanted both, you'd have to link both. So here I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go to my code, and then anywhere within my head of my HTML, I'm just going to paste that. So it's going to be a super long link. If you do Alt, or I don't know exactly what that is on Windows, but for Mac, Alt Z, I think it's Option Z, that'll actually compress this to one size. So now here's my link, and now I have access to all the things that Bootstrap gives me. There's a couple things that you want to do when you're really dealing. Again, you see this like quick start. We have a couple different ways that we can link this. Here we have our link here. And if I wanted to do our script, it has it here at the bottom, actually in the body. This is if I wanted to use JavaScript. There's a couple different basic things to understand and to know. The first thing is when we are dealing with our Bootstrap and we're understanding how Bootstrap works, please know that it works via a grid. And so what it does in the background is it actually breaks down your viewport. So a viewport is basically when we have some sort of metadata here, this viewport, we have the access to see what size of screen is currently requesting and reading this, right? And so that's how when you're dealing with a dynamic website and you want to have like the difference between a mobile app versus an iPad app or tablet app, and then a different computer or desktop app, the viewport size is how you can sort of change how different things operate and work. So you'd have some sort of condition that if it's less than 900 megapixels, then that's going to go to a tablet. Less than 900 but greater than 400, that's a tablet. And there's not really like everybody believes the same size. It's kind of within your company, but it's all relatively in the same sort of range of what is a tablet, what is a phone, and what is a desktop. But with that, whatever size you have, just know that what Bootstrap will do is it will slice it up in 12 different sections. They'll slice it up in 12 different sections. So even here, we have this column, right? And you can think about this is 1/3, there's 33% of my column. So this is 4 columns, right? And then here's the other 33%. So this part is 66% of my entire screen. That means if my screen gets bigger, this section is dynamic, that it will also get bigger. And if my screen gets smaller, it will also get smaller. So just knowing that it's on a grid is going to be important, because we need to know, if this is 12 different pieces, then we need to know how this is going to operate and how this is going to work. So number one important thing is this is on a grid, right? And we'll see how that kind of plays in as well. It's on a grid, and then we have this thing called a container. Now, a container is really just a good way to handle, again, the dynamic aspect of our code. And here you can see this is how Bootstrap sets it up. That if something is less than 576 pixels, that is extra small. A container will take up 100% of that. If it is greater than 576, then it will take up 540. But if it's less than 678, take up 540, and so on and so forth. And so this is just how you designate and say, okay, this is how much of my screen I want you to take up. Or you can do something called container fluid, which just means I want you to always take up 100% of my screen. Not always how it works, but 100% of my space. Cool. Now, the way that you use Bootstrap is you just say the class, and in our case with React, because React is like uses class name, we're just going to say class name, and then you put the name of the class of whatever you want to do, and it will allow you to basically pull in that whatever CSS they have or whatever rules they have and start utilizing those simply by calling the class. Here you can see that there are responsive containers. So you can say, container-sm. These mean, again, no matter what size that they go back and forth, they will change and they will alter as well. But those are really the two big things to know. So what I can do is here, let's actually get rid of this code, is I'm going to create a div that has my container. Now, I don't know if GitHub Copilot listens or what the heck is going on, but I'm going to create a div that has a class of container. Now, there's a couple different ways I can do that. I can type out div space class container, and this is just sort of a quick way to do it within VS Code, is I can just say dot container. If I say dot container, you can see this emit abbreviation will already create a div with a class of container. If I just say dot container, it gives me a div with a class of container. Now, there's a couple different other things you can do. Is this again is on a grid, and so sometimes you can put things in a row, meaning I want these to be side by side, or you can put them in columns, and basically you can, on a grid, shift and move things for a column. I'm going to do a form, and there's a few things I'm going to do for this form to make sure that we are good to go. So if I'm going to forms here, so let's go look at the documentation. Okay, maybe I already missed it. Forms, cool. So here, I like how this looks. This is great. Cool. I see that there's a class. MB is margin bottom. So it means it's going to push some margin to the bottom. And here we've got a label. with a class of form label that says email address, and that'll look like this label here. And then we've got an input for form control, and that'll look like this. And if I want to add a placeholder, I can add a placeholder right here to where it says name at example.com. So very simple things by just using form label, example, or form control. And then you can add in different things like this placeholder, and it makes it look really, really, really nice. Now notice that these two are a div, which means that it pairs them together within Bootstrap. So if it's in a div, it'll sort of truncate and put them together. And then there's other things I can do as well. If I wanted this input to be larger, I can say, instead of form control, I can say I can add on the other class of form control large. If I wanted it default, I can say form control just normal, and that'll be this guy. And if I wanted it small, I can add on the class of form control small. And so very quickly, I can change the sizes of these inputs, which is awesome. I can do so many different things with our inputs. If I wanted disabled input, so they couldn't add in anything, but it was automatically there, I can do that. Or read only. I can do so many different things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's see, I'm going to create a form. And what do we want to do with our form? Let's see. Can't remember the exact. I think it's just form. There's so many different classes. We'll just start here. So I'm going to say form. And again, because I have this image abbreviation, I can say dot. I'm going to say column 4, meaning of my 12 different ways, or my 12 different columns, right? Remember how there was split up in 12. I want this to take up 4 of them, or 33% of them. Now, because I'm saying form dot call dash 4, what this is going to do is this is going to create a form with a class of call dash 4. And if I wanted to add on another, because I want it in the middle, I can say mx auto. Now, if I press enter, I create this form with call dash 4 mx auto. Cool. Now I can just say div. Great. And I'm going to say label, form label. Just say name. And then I'm going to say input form control. Cool. And then let's see, I think it's cool. So this is what it automatically looks like. Like you can see, I didn't do much, and I already get this functionality of when I'm clicking in this hovers, this is blue, this name piece is there. Great, I can add on a whole bunch of different things. That way, let's say I wanted to, within my form, just have a H2 that says, please fill out this form. Let's see how that looks. Cool, that looks awesome. It looks great. Because I did MX Auto, this is in the middle here. Now I can just continue to do that. I can say, div. Within that, I'm going to say label dot form label. And let's say I wanted to do an email. So email. Now what I can do, because our inputs are different types, I can say input. Oh goodness, input email. If I put the colon, that's email dot form control. That's going to create an input with the type of email that is form control. Let me just say email. Cool. So now if I refresh this, cool, I've got email. That's a little bit close for me. So there's 2 things I could do. I can say in my label, I can say I want this to have some margin on top of it, meaning push it down. So I can say margin top. So MT, it's through 1 through 5. So I'm saying MT3. Come here. And then now you'll see that there's going to be a shift. Perfect. Now that's shifted. That looks great. And then lastly, what I want to do is I want to create a button to submit it. So I'm going to say button dot BTN. BTN is just a way that's going to make the button look kind of rounded and nice. And then if I want to add another class, I say BTN primary, and this is all in the documentation. There's danger, there's secondary, and that's just going to give me submit here. That's just going to give me different colors. So here, okay, submit here. Great. If I wanted this actually as danger, if I wanted it red, I can do that. And I'm also going to add margin top 3. And now if I come here, I can have a different color. I can do secondaries, like a nice, ocean green, if you will. And it's just a way that I can do a ton of stuff very, very quickly. All I had to do was add in the CDN, and this is really all we have to do for React as well. We'll go into our index.html, add this in, and then we have access to all of this functionality. Now, reminding you that for what we're doing now, all it is showing you what it will look like. It's not dealing with any sort of functionality. We haven't added any JavaScript stuff. I'm not really going to focus on that because that's not necessary for what we're doing. But we can do a whole bunch of different things. If I wanted a radio or a checkbox within my form, I can do that. All I have to do is come here and say form check. Perfect. Now I have this nice checkbox that they created that I can have and deal with some sort of different thing. If I wanted to have these disabled because they're already added, I can use Bootstrap to do that. Are there any questions on Bootstrap, sort of how to add it, how to lay it out? It might be weird at the beginning, and it's just a lot of classes that you'll remember, but that's really all it is you just have a bunch of different classes. And as long as you know their name and you know how they operate, then you can do that. Like if I wanted this bigger, I could say 8, right? And that's going to give me a much larger form because it now takes up 2/3 of my page, of my container. So somebody asked, it's the exact same for React. Yep, it's the exact same. The only thing with React is we'll just say class name. That's the only difference. And then when we go into React, what we'll do is we'll grab this right here. Come to this public, we'll come into our index.html, we'll put it right up here. And then now we'll have access to it. And so now anywhere in my JSX files that say class name and I associate it to, a button, it'll look nice. So that's all we'll have to do for React, is put it right there within our index. That's the only thing we have to touch. And so now very quickly, and then once you get used to it, you'll be able to just pop these, out because you already know, okay, column 8, I want it bigger. It's a little bit too big. Let's go to column 6. Great. Now it's column 6. I don't really like that it's in the middle. So let's say I don't want it in the middle. Let's take out the MX auto. It'll move it to the left. You're like, that doesn't really make sense. You can add like offset 3. And then what that'll do is it'll move from the left 3 of the squares, and then it'll take up the 6. So there's a whole bunch of different sort of nuancy things that, again, the documentation is really, really, really great. So if you wanted to add this stuff in, I would get used to it. I'm going to start doing that in class. But buttons is just a really easy thing. So you have primary, secondary, success, danger, warning, info, light, dark, link. You have a ton of different things that you can do. And all you do to change that is secondary or BTN success, and automatically will pull that in for you. Any questions on this? Somebody asked, does React not have its own styling folder for hidden somewhere? No, it doesn't. There's another popular one that's very similar. There's a lot of these guys that I've not messed with a ton, but here's a big component thing that as you start building and as you're using components, instead of having to build out like a calendar component, you could use something called Material UI. And this will be like basically components that you can just bring in very quickly, that you can add in and utilize Material UI in the same way that like Bootstrap works, right? You just sort of, the code's already written. You can just bring that into your React library and then use that component however you want. So here is like a button, right? So to answer your question, no, it's not built in, but there are tools like Material UI that allow you to do one of these different things and just add in that component to your,
I don't know of any language that has built-in CSS.
yeah, they wouldn't.
Yeah, they wouldn't.
Not that I know of at least.
Not that I know of either. Primarily ones I've used as a separate thing when it comes to it.
Yeah.
For those who are gonna play with Bootstrap, there is a difference between React Bootstrap and Bootstrap. So Will showed you Bootstrap. So whenever you're looking up the documentation, just be mindful of that. I think technically I think they're all the same styles, but when you're using React Bootstrap or React Strap, it's slightly different syntax. So he's just showing you like vanilla Bootstrap, putting in your HTML. So it's slightly different. So when you're looking it up, just make sure you're actually on the Bootstrap website and not the React Bootstrap. So this is a slightly different setup.
Yeah, because these are going to be a little bit different for how it's set up. You can do either one, honestly, whichever one's, if you guys are starting Bootstrap, the reason I show that is because you can use that on, a couple different things, right? So it's like, this is just tailored towards React, but then Bootstrap, you can use that in Python and Java and whatever language you want to use. But either one works. But if you wanted to, like if you needed to import a button, you want to do that, looks like it's the exact same thing.
Yeah. And it's all capitalized when you do rec. Was another question was like, can you mix and match like the CSS libraries? You technically can, I believe. But the thing is that if they have the same name, like say for instance, like Bootstrap names it primary and then someone names it, I don't know, secondary, whatever, I don't know. But like, it's going to be a battle of specificity. It's a fancy word of saying which one is more specific. So since they're all classes, depending on where you have your Bootstrap versus MUI versus whatever, one is going to win. So the thing is that unless you know what you're doing, I would not advise it. Just stick to one. Yes, it is a certain color scheme set to each of them. You can technically change it, but for right now, for the course and program, unless you're really good at CSS, you love it a lot, I don't recommend it. But it can be done. It's just, if you're starting out, just stick with the basics for now until you're familiar with how to even use CSS libraries.
Well said. Yeah, what Gray's talking about is if you have the same sort of keyword and it can get confused. So let's say that you had Material UI and you had Bootstrap, and these both, let's say they shared the same sort of functionality or the same keywords, then it can get confused. So I would stick with, sort of separating them out, getting used to the nice thing about it is the functionality is the same in regards of there's just really classes that you pull in. And so learning how to use these is, if you learn how to use one, being able to pick up, if you learn how to use Bootstrap, you'll be able to pick up Material UI well or quickly. If you use Material UI, it's not a huge lift, which I'm sure you guys are learning in the tech world. That's very common, right? Like if you understand one language, it's not as hard to understand another one. So any other questions on this? And just like Grace said, Bootstrap's just one of many that you can use. It's one that I like to use because, in teaching, I'm always just basically doing forms and doing very basic styling. And since I already know it, it's just very quick for me. But there's other ones that you can use as well.
If you wanted to learn how to like alter the styles, if you're like, oh, it's getting a little boring, then you can learn that there too, because you can download the whole CDN file, import it into your project, and then just change those class names to, hey, I don't want primary to be this blue color. I want it to be orange. I don't know.
Sure.
So you can change it up like that if you want more of a challenge. So there's still plenty to learn, and I feel like you never not learn. Yeah. So cool. So let us know how that goes.
Yeah. Any other questions on this real quickly? Cool. Okay, I'm gonna stop this recording.